Hey everyone, if you're new to Claude Code, you might feel overwhelmed by all the commands available and wonder what they all do. So in this video, I'll walk you through all the commands that Claude Code has and show you what they do and how to use them effectively. I'm going to assume you already have Claude Code installed. Let's get started. The first command is the bug command. Since Claude Code is still a relatively new tool, the team at Anthropic is actively building and improving it, and like any evolving product, that means bugs can pop up. If you come across a bug while coding, you can use the /bug command to report it directly to the team. It's a simple way to contribute and just improve the platform. What's really cool is that Anthropic also maintains a public GitHub page for Claude Code, and this is a page where you can see all the current issues that are being tracked, as well as feature requests and any bugs. It's very active, and you'll often see the actual Claude Code developers engaging with users here, talking through issues, bugs, and features. So if you're interested in the development of Claude Code, this is a great place to get involved in. Next up is the clear command, and it's probably the most important command in Claude Code. So if there's one command to know, it's this one. What clear does is that it clears out your entire current chat conversation, all the context, and starts a brand new conversation. So why is this such a big deal? It's because large language models are stateless. That means they don't actually remember past messages between chats. Instead, every time you send a message in the same conversation window, Claude reprocesses the entire conversation history to understand the context. So let's just break this down with a simplified example. Let's say you send message 1, which costs 1,000 tokens, then you send message 2, which on its own costs 500 tokens. You would think message 2 would only cost 500 tokens, but that's not how it works. Because LLMs are stateless, the model doesn't remember anything you sent in message 1. And because you are still in the same chat window, the model assumes that every message you sent before is still relevant. So what the model will do is that it will send all of message 1 again, plus message 2. So in reality, message 2 actually costs 1,500 tokens. So if you send message 3, the actual token cost is going to be message 1 plus message 2 plus message 3. So you can see that with every follow-up message you send within the same chat window, each message is going to cost more and more tokens, which means if you have these super long chat windows with Claude, you will quickly use up all your tokens. And that's where this clear command comes in. So in this example, I have a long conversation going on. It's just pages and pages and pages. So every new message you send in here is also going to send all of this as part of the input, and you don't want that. So when you run /clear, what this is going to do is that it's going to clear up all this context and start a brand new chat. So now you can see that once I ran it, there's no more context, right? So if I scroll up, there's nothing left. All that context has been cleared up. And now we have a brand new chat. So now your next message you send will be sent without the entire previous context. And this helps reduce unnecessary token usage. So when should you use this clear command? You want to use this command as often as possible. A good rule of thumb is to run it whenever you finish a task. You don't want multiple unrelated tasks piling up in the same chat, because that's just going to bloat up your token count and make responses less focused. And just a quick note, this is a simplified example, and I do have a video that goes into more depth on how to optimize your token usage and how Claude Code calculates all of it. So if you're interested, go check it out. I'll link it in the description below. Next up is the compact command. The compact command is one of Claude Code's tools for managing token usage, similar to clear, but with a different approach. While clear wipes out your chat history completely and starts from scratch, compact helps you reduce token usage by summarizing your conversation and starting a new chat with that summary. It's a way to keep important context without carrying every message forward. And this is how it works. When you run /compact, Claude takes your entire current conversation and creates a summary of it and starts a new chat window with that summary preloaded. Now, by default, if you were just to run /compact, what this is going to do is it's going to create a summary of your entire conversation. So everything you have in your current conversation, it's going to take that entire thing and summarize it. And just another thing to note here, when Claude Code reaches 95% capacity, so when this thing right here says there's only 5% left, it's going to auto-compact your conversation. So this is Claude Code's way to help you out. Now, this default way of compacting is fine in many cases, but sometimes it's not what you want. You can actually customize what Claude summarizes by adding specific instructions. So for example, if I was just to do /compact, you can see that I have this optional custom summarization instruction. So I can say things like summarize just the to-do items, and this will summarize all the to-do items I have within my current conversation. And I can maybe say summarize only the last conversation, because maybe that's the only thing that's relevant. So Claude Code is just going to go through here, find my last conversation, and just summarize it. Or I can say something like keep the summary to a max of 500 words or something, and this is going to further limit what Claude Code summarizes. So there's a lot of different ways to provide what summary you want to Claude. So let's just say for this example, I just want to say summarize the last conversation. So what this is going to do is Claude's going to read my last conversation, provide a summary of it, open it up, and then preload it. So just give it a few seconds and let's see what happens. Okay, so it looks like Claude Code has finished summarizing my conversation. And you can see right here, this is that summary. So this is my previous conversation compacted, right? It read through a bunch of stuff and it provided a summary. So if I was just to hit Control R, this will show me what it summarized. So this is the summary. So now when I continue this conversation, this is the only thing that's going to be part of my context. It's no longer going to be the entire previous conversation. And what's even better is I have a summary of my previous conversation, so I can just quickly pick up where I left off. Next up is the config command. So this command lets you customize Claude Code's behavior to fit how you like to work. Let's walk through each option and show you what it does. So let's go to Claude Code and write /config. And in here, this is where you will find all your settings. So the first item is this auto compact. This setting controls whether Claude Code will automatically compact your conversation once it reaches 95% capacity. So remember in the compact command that we saw previously, we had that little status indicator at the bottom. So when that status indicator reaches 5%, Claude Code will auto compact. And this is the setting that determines if you want it on or off. Now, I recommend you leaving this on so you don't have to worry about hitting your limit and having everything just break. Next up is the use to do setting. This is one of the key reasons Claude Code feels more focused and effective compared to other AI coding tools. When you ask Claude Code to build a new feature, Claude Code automatically creates an internal to-do list and follows that list step by step. This helps it stay on track even as the task gets complex. This is important because LLMs tend to lose focus in long conversations, but with a to-do list, Claude Code keeps its objectives clear and avoids getting lost in the details. So I 100% recommend you keep this setting as true. So let me show you what I mean with this to-do list. I'm just going to exit out of here. I am in this facts directory, and I am just going to ask Claude Code to create a new feature to allow users to add multiple animals via a endpoint. So I'm just going to let this run and show you that to-do list. Okay, so now that it finished running, let me show you Claude Code's thinking process. So if I scroll to the top, this is the request that I asked Claude Code to do, just to create a new API endpoint. So this right here is a to-do list that Claude Code is creating internally. Now remember, I did not ask Claude Code to create any to-do list. This is simply something that Claude Code has created internally. And this is just saying, hey, the first thing that we should do is explore the code base. Then the second thing to do is design the new endpoints and so on and so on. So the first step is to explore the code base. So you can see here, it does that right here. Let's explore the code structure. So it goes through here, it reads a bunch of files, right? So now that it finished reading, it finished that first item. So now it's going to update that to-do list. You can see in this update to-do list, that first item is now complete. So what's the next step? Well, the next step is to design that new endpoint, okay? So what is it going to do? Well, I am going to create a new schema for it because that's designing it, right? So now it is here, and this is going to ask it to make some edits to the animal.py file that I have. So you can see that Claude Code is following this to-do list. And it's a really cool way for Claude Code to keep focus on what it needs to do. So going back to the config, I 100% recommend you keep this as true. Next is the verbose output. If you enable this, it's going to show you all of Claude's thinking process, like what files it's searching through, what functions it's reading, and so on. This is great if you are someone who wants full visibility into the model's decision making, but a heads up, if you enable this, it will literally output you the entire file's content in your chat window. So if your file content is 1,000 lines of code, it is literally going to print out 1,000 lines of code for you. So what I recommend you do is to keep the setting as false, which is the default setting. And if you need to dig into its thinking process, you can actually click Control R and that will toggle the verbose view on and off whenever you need it. So the next one is theme. This one is simple. Just choose between light mode or dark mode. So just click on it and you can choose all the different types of modes you want. I'm just gonna keep mine on light mode. Next is notification. Just keep this as auto. Next is this editor mode. So you have normal and Vim. If you know what Vim is and want to use Vim style key binding inside Claude Code, you can switch to Vim here. Otherwise, don't worry about it. And the last setting is model. This setting lets you choose which model Claude Code is going to use. So by default, Claude Code is going to use this setting, and that means that Claude Code is going to use Opus 4 and automatically switch to Sonnet 4 when needed. But if you want, you can specify a model you want here manually. For example, if you want to only use Opus 4, then just click on this. If you only want to use Sonnet 4, just click on this. So this is just a way to switch models. And just a note here, Opus 4 is only available for Max plan users. So if you are a Pro plan user, you won't have this option, and the default option actually defaults to Sonnet 4. So let's just say I want to use Sonnet 4. Hit this and it's going to go back to Sonnet. And that's it for the config command. The next command is the cost command. So this command shows you how much you have spent using Claude Code, but this is only if you are using the API version. If you're on the Max or the Pro plan, this command won't return any data since those plans don't track cost the same way. But if you're using the API version, if you just do /cost, this is just going to tell you how much you have used so far in your session. So it's a pretty good way just to keep track of all your cost. The next command is the doctor command, and it's a simple diagnostic tool. It checks whether your Claude Code installation is working properly. So if we type /doctor, this is mostly just going to tell us whether Claude Code has the necessary npm permissions to function properly. This is just a quick way to confirm everything's configured correctly, especially if you are troubleshooting. The help command is exactly what it sounds like. So if we just do /help, it gives you a full list of all the available commands in Claude Code, along with a short description of what each one does. So if we scroll up, we could kind of see that these are all the commands that are available to us, along with a short description of what they do. And if you're just getting started, definitely make use of it. The init command is your project starting point in Claude Code. When you run it, Claude scans your entire code base, reading every single file, and generates a file called claude.md. So let's do that right now for the code base I'm in. So right now I'm in Claude Code, and I am in this animal facts directory. So let's just run /init and see what happens. And this command is going to take a while because it's going to read through every single file. Okay, so now that it finished, you can see that this is that file that it's going to generate for you. So let's just hit yes, and it's going to create that claude.md file. So just hit yes, and it's going to write that file to your code base. Okay, so now that it finished, let me open up VS Code, and this right here is that new file that just got created. And within this file, you will find a high-level summary of your project. So what it does, how it's structured, key components, important functions, and so on. So if we look at this claude.md file that was created in my case, I can see that we have some stuff in terms of our development commands. We have stuff on our architecture overview, how the project is structured, what key components there are. So there's a lot of high-level summary within this file, and it's very helpful for the user as well as Claude Code. So this file essentially acts as a memory for your codebase. Now, by default, large language models like Claude are stateless, which means they don't remember anything from one chat to the next. Every new conversation starts with a blank slate, unless you give it context. And that's where this Claude.md file comes in. When you run /init, Claude Code builds this file as a persistent summary of your project. Then, when you start a new conversation, Claude automatically reads this file first. That way, it already understands the context of your project before you ask it to do anything. So even though the model itself can't retain memory, this Claude.md file gives it a way to simulate memory. And yes, this is the same file used by the memory command, which we will cover in more details later. You should always run /init when using Claude Code on a project for the first time, and this is something Anthropic actually recommends you do. Also, keep in mind that you can edit the Claude.md file manually if you ever want to clarify or update the summary as your codebase evolves. So this is just a text file, so you can just write and add stuff as needed. The login command is pretty straightforward. It lets you log into Claude Code. The one important thing to note here is that when you log in, there's two methods. You can either log in with the subscription plan, which is for those on the Pro plan or the Max plan, and there's also a login through the API plan. So just make sure you choose the correct one. The logout command is also pretty straightforward. It logs you out of Claude Code. But here's a useful feature. When you log out of Claude Code, it actually gives you a summary of your session. So you can see how much that session cost, how long it ran for, and what type of models that session used. So it's a great way to track your usage and get a quick snapshot of what Claude did behind the scenes. The MCP command allows you to connect Claude Code with external MCP servers. Now, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and at a high level, it's a protocol that standardizes how large language models like Claude interact with external tools, systems, and applications. Now, this is a big topic and can get very technical, so in this video, I'll stick to a high-level explanation of what MCP is and why it's useful. I won't cover how to install it or how to set up a MCP server here, since it's a more involved process, and the installation differs depending on what servers you want installed. But don't worry, I'll have dedicated videos on MCP soon. The easiest way to understand MCP is through an example. So by default, LLMs like Claude only understand text, some images, and maybe PDFs. They can't directly interact with things like a Postgres database. So if you ask Claude, hey, what does database XYZ do? It won't know how to access it, it won't know how to read the tables, or even understand its structure. That's because LLMs can't natively connect to or operate external systems. They need everything in a textual format. So this is exactly where MCP comes in. A MCP server, for example, one built for Postgres, acts as a kind of translator or interface layer. It exposes the structure, functionality, and data of the database in a way that Claude can understand and interact with using natural language. So with a MCP connection, Claude can reason about, query, or even help modify things like a Postgres database, because it now has a structured way to interact with through a MCP layer. So this is a powerful concept with a lot of potential, and definitely something I will cover more deeply in future videos. But if you're interested, go to the site here and read through this page. It has a lot of good information on what MCP is, how to configure MCP servers, how to understand the different scoping levels for MCP servers, how to set up authentication, and even here it has an example on how to connect to a Postgres MCP server. So there's a lot of information on this website, so definitely go here and give it a read if you're interested. The memory command builds directly on what we discussed earlier with the /init command. To quickly recap, when you run /init, Claude Code scans your project and creates a file called claude.md. So this is that file right here. This is that claude.md file that is within my codebase called animal facts. So this file acts as the memory of your codebase. storing a summary of your project structure, components, and key behaviors. Since Claude itself is stateless, meaning it doesn't retain memory between chats, this file gives it a persistent, reusable context for future conversations. Now, memory in Claude Code is a deep topic and also very subjective. How you use it will vary depending on your workflow and preferences. So in this video, I'll just give you a high-level overview of what memory is and how to use it, and in a future video, we'll deep dive into it further. Okay, so at a high level, Claude Code supports 3 types of memories. There's project memory, there's user memory, and then there's this project memory local. So just ignore this one for now because it's no longer being used. So we'll just focus on these 2 here. Now, as a FYI, all the memory files that gets created are all named claude.md. So it can be a bit confusing. So the first one is this project memory. So this is the claude.md file that gets created in your current project directory when you run /init. So this is that file right here. So this is the project that I have, and this is that file right there within the root folder. So when I run /init, this is going to get all populated, and it's just a summary of what this codebase does. So every time you work within this directory, Claude will reference this file for context. So in this file, this is where you can store things like a high-level architectural description, which is what gets auto-populated when you run /init. You can also have things like coding standards specific to this project. So let's just say that here, I want to have a section for coding standards. So I can have this little section right here. So maybe for this project, I want to use 4 spaces for indentation. I want to have a max length of 80 characters. I want to make sure that there's specific schemas for data models and so forth. So there's just a lot of things you could do here. You could have whatever coding standards you want. Now, just keep in mind, this project memory should include things relevant to the whole code base. So the things you write here should not be specific to one file or subfolder. Okay, now let's look at the second one, user memory. This is a global memory file, which means it applies across all your projects. So whatever project you do within Claude Code, this user memory file will always be called. So let's see how we can actually create it. So let's just go into Claude Code, and I'm just going to write /memory. And here, this is just going to tell me what type of memories I have. So you can see here that I have one project memory, and it's that claude.md file that we looked at earlier. And here we have the 3 levels of memory. So we have the project memory with the local one, ignore this one, and then this is that user memory. So right now we have 0 memories in here. So if we click on this, this is going to open up a new file, and this new file is the user memory file. This is where you want to store personal preferences that apply across all your projects. So for example, this is where you can have things like user preferences. For example, you want Claude Code to call you a certain name, you could put it here. If you want Claude Code to keep your responses short and concise, you can mention it here. And you can also have Claude Code avoid certain phrases. So with Sonnet 4, it really likes to use phrases like "you're absolutely correct" and "this is perfect." So if you don't like that, you could tell Claude Code to avoid that. You can tell Claude Code to always respond in markdown format, use bullet points instead of paragraphs. And for coding style preferences, you can say that you like to use snake case. You can tell Claude Code to avoid short variable names like X and temp. So there's a lot of things you can include in this user memory file, and the things I have here is just a quick example, and you can quickly adapt this to your own personal preferences. Okay, now let's look at how to import custom files into memories. Okay, now let's look at how to import custom files into memories. So with Claude Code, they also give you the ability to import custom files that can act as your own memory. So let's go back to our codebase memory file. So that's this one right here. So this is the claude.md file within my codebase. So here I have this line right here where I say reference at get instructions.md. So if I open up this file, this is the one right here, I have some custom instructions that I want Claude Code to know in terms of how to write a git commit message. So instead of having all of this within here, I can write that instruction here, and then within this memory file here, I can simply just say, hey, reference this file in this location. And Claude Code is smart enough to know that if it sees this @ sign, it's going to look into this file file and pull in the necessary information and make it as part of the memory. So the ability to import custom files into this memory file is very nice, and it just keeps your memory file short and organized. Okay, now let's look at a quick way to add something to memory with the memory hashtag sign. So if I am in Claude Code and I want to add something to memory directly without having to go to my claude.md file, what I can do is I can just do hashtag, and this will tell me to add a memory. So let's say that I want to add a memory of prefer map and filter over for loops. And if I hit enter, now this is going to tell me where I want to save it. So let's say that I want to save this memory into our project memory. So it's just hit enter, and this is going to save it into that memory. So now that it finished, let's go look at that memory. So if we open up our project memory, right? So we are in our claude.md within our animal facts file. This is that exact memory that we asked Claude Code to create for us, and it's stored right here. Okay, now let's go look at some best practices when it comes to Claude memories. So when it comes to best practices, you always want to be specific, and that makes sense. You always want to be as descriptive as possible. So you don't want to have general instructions like use comments and functions. That's not very helpful. Instead, you want to say all functions must include a multi-line comment with a short description, parameter list, dependencies, and return type. That is much more specific, and Claude Code will have a better idea of what to do with it. And the second is you always want to use structure to organize. So that means you want to kind of format each individual memory as a bullet point within a group. So in my case here, I have a group for coding standards. I have a group for local development. So you just don't want to have these things scattered throughout the memory file. You want to kind of put these into logical groupings. So memory is a very powerful tool, and it can easily get overwhelming. Now, my personal recommendation is that if you are just starting with Claude Code, don't worry too much about memory at first. So just use Claude Code for a while and just see what type of patterns and preferences come up naturally, and then slowly start to add those into your memory over time. Also, another important thing to note here is do not go overboard. I have seen users with thousands of memory entries, and that usually ends up confusing both the user and the model. So keep your memory files lean. The model command lets you choose exactly which Claude model you want Claude Code to use when processing your request. So if I go to /model, by default, if you're on the max plan, Claude Code will use Opus 4 until you reach 20% of your sessions usage limits. Then it will switch to Sonnet 4. If you're on the Pro plan, it will just default to Sonnet 4. Now, if you don't like this default option, you can specify which model you want Claude Code to use. So in this case, I can decide if I want to use Opus 4 or Sonnet 4. Now, if you want to use a model that's not Opus 4 or Sonnet 4, for example, let's say you want to use Sonnet 3.7 or even 3.5, what you can do is you can go to this website here. So this is just Anthropic's models website. So if you go here and scroll down, there is a list of all the models that Claude Code currently has. And let's just say that you want to use Claude Sonnet 3.5. So what you're going to do is just copy this name here. Now it's important if you're using Claude Code to copy the name from this column here. So copy from this first column. Copy this name, go back to here, exit out, and just write /model, and then just paste in that name. And now if you hit enter, this is going to set Claude Code to using that specific model. And that's it. The permissions command lets you control which tools Claude Code can and cannot automatically run in your codebase. If you have used Claude Code before, you have probably run into this situation. Claude tries to run a command, then pauses to ask for your approval, runs a bit more, then stops again, waiting again for your approval for the next action, and so on and so on. So this is helpful for safety, but when it comes to development speed, it can really slow you down. That's where the permissions command comes in. Once you are comfortable with Claude's tools, you can specify which commands it's allowed to run without asking you, and which ones should still require manual approval. So Claude Code supports 4 types of permission rules. You have bash, you have read and edit, you have web fetch, and then you have MCP. So let's break each one down. The first is the bash commands. So for those new to the terminal or Linux, which is what Mac is based off, so this also applies to Mac users as well. Bash commands are terminal instructions like running scripts, searching and editing text files, installing packages, and so on. And when it comes to permissions for bash commands, you can allow specific bash commands using exact matches or wildcards. Okay, so now let's look at this in Claude Code. So if I go to Claude Code and write /permissions, you can see that there's 3 tabs. I have the allow, I have the deny, and I have the workspace tab. So let's just say, for example, that you do a lot of Node.js projects and you want Claude Code to always be able to run npm run build without having you to always approve it in any projects. So if I go to this allow tab and I hit enter on here, so in here, if I write bash npm run build, this is now going to let Claude Code run this command without having you to ever approve it again. And another cool thing is that Claude Code also supports wildcards for these bash commands. So let's take a look at this example right here. So for this example, I have npm run test wildcard. So this is kind of saying that anytime Claude Code encounters a command that starts with npm run test, it will always approve it. So let's say that you have npm run test coverage, that is going to be auto approved because you have this here. So that's the first type, bash. Now let's look at the read and write. So these permissions control which files Claude Code can read and edit. And they also follow the git ignore filters if you're familiar with Git. Okay, let's go take a look at an example. So I'm just going to open up VS Code and I have this hello.py file. Now currently, if I go to Claude Code and I just type out this statement of add a print.high statement to the hello.py file, what's going to happen is that Claude Code is going to need my approval first before it can edit this file. So just give it a few seconds and see right here, it's going to ask me for approval to add this file. But let's say that I don't want this. I want Claude Code to auto approve this. How can I do this? So to do that, let me just exit out of this. Let me just go to permissions. And in here within my allowed tab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new rule. So I'm going to hit enter. And then here, I am going to add a rule of edit. Now remember, this is how it looks like. This is how it looks like for edit. So I'm going to go to edit hello.py and then just hit save. And I'm going to save it into my project setting, hit enter. And then now I have this new rule that allows me to edit into this hello.py file. So now I'm going to exit out this. And what you need to do is you actually have to exit first in order for Claude Code to refresh. So I'm going to exit this, re-enter Claude Code. And now I'm going to ask that exact same command. So I'm going to ask this exact same command and see what happens. Now I'll hit enter. And then it says it's going to add it. And then there, it's done. Now it says this file now contains that statement. So let's go take a look. If I open up this file, and there it is. So that's the second type, read and edit. Now let's look at web fetch. So Claude Code can also fetch information from the web, but normally it'll ask you before doing so. So if you want Claude Code to always be able to search a specific site, you can add a rule by first going to permissions again, going to allow, add a new rule, and here I'm just going to add a new rule of web fetch, and then here just enter the website that I want. So I'm going to say google.com. Hit enter and just hit my project settings. And then now if I just refresh, let's exit this, go Claude, and let's just say search Google to see what time it is in New York City. Hit enter. And then now it should be able to search Google without having me to approve. And there it is. It just says what time it is. Okay, now let's look at MCP. So for MCP, these permissions control which server tools you can allow. So you can allow or restrict certain tools within a MCP server. So for example, here, this is saying that this allows you to use any tools within the Puppeteer server. But if you want to get more specific, you can say to allow or deny a specific tool within that server, such as to navigate. Now, if you want to delete a rule, it's really simple. All you got to do is go into your permissions, find the rule that you want, hit on it, and just say if you want to delete it or not. And that's it. Now, here's something important. Be very careful with permissions. Don't just copy someone else's permission rules unless you understand exactly what each command does. Allowing Claude Code to automatically run tools, especially ones that create or edit files, can cause major problems if misused. The PR comments command lets you view the comments from a GitHub pull request inside Claude Code. And the review command allows Claude Code to review a GitHub pull request for you. So the status command shows your working directory, it shows what account you're logged into, so if you have the Max or Pro plan, make sure you are actually logged into that and not the API version. It also shows you what type of memories you currently have, as well as which model you're using. So this is a great command just to kind of get an overview of your entire code base. The terminal setup command allows you to use the Option plus Enter keyboard shortcut to enter new lines. And for the Vim command, if you are a Vim user, this command will put Claude Code into Vim mode, enabling Vim style keybinds. So if you're not familiar with Vim, don't worry about it. Personally, I don't use Vim, so I skipped this one. And that's it. This is a full overview of all the commands Claude Code has to offer and how they work and how to use them effectively. I know this was a lot of information and some topics like MCP go much deeper than what we covered here, but don't worry, I'll be making more videos on those topics soon. And I hope this was helpful and cleared up some confusions around some of the commands that Claude Code has. If you have any questions or want me to cover something specific in a future video, feel free to drop a comment below. Thanks for watching. See you all in the next one.